Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Zander Sprague, and I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I want to start off with our thought of the day, which is, if you have some doubting questions, how do I? What should I do? Sometimes that stops us in our tracks. And what I want to say to that is, say, so what? I'll give you a perfect example. As confident as I am, there are situations where I know I need to speak, but I feel like I'm going to interrupt someone, and I know how I feel when I get phone calls, randomly and stuff. And so I have to say, do I have permission? So what? I'm still going to ask the question because I have something that I need to find out. And you don't get anything if you don't try. And if you don't ask for what you need, you're simply not going to get it. So the next time you have one of those questions where you're doubting yourself, what if you said, so what? I don't need permission for that. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Because here's the thing, you most likely are no worse off than where you are right now, and you're most likely going to be further along. I wanted to give you an epic update on Oscar Vasquez, who I interviewed on the podcast, and we talked about the importance of estate planning. Now, I don't want to be modeling here, but making sure that you've taken care of your affairs, even way ahead of when you think you might need it. Life, I can tell you from personal experience, can change in an instant. You remember in one of my one of my shows, I talked about my sister Lucy, who was murdered. That obviously happened very quickly, and without having proper planning, it would have been much more difficult for my family to settle her estate. So if you have questions about that, go and listen to that podcast with Oscar Vasquez, because it's fascinating and he gives some really good advice. Now today, I am so excited to welcome Natasha Paddock to talk about mental health. It is Mental Health Month. Yes. Natasha, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, first of all, Zander, thank you so much for having me today. I am a nonprofit CEO. I run a nonprofit organization, Cope Family Support Center, here in Contra Costa. We're based out of Walnut Creek. Our flagship program is an evidence-based parenting education model called the Positive Parenting Program, which is also affectionately known as Triple P. And we also, for the last 7 years, have been running a clinical therapy department. And so, in a nutshell, we're a holistic services agency that serves not just the individual, but the entire family on their mental wellness journey.
Absolutely, and that is so important. And this being Mental Health Awareness Month, yeah. What a perfect time to have you on, and let's talk about it. So, positive parenting. Yeah. Tell me a little more about it, because that sounds fascinating.
It really is a phenomenal concept. So a little bit about me. I'm a professional social worker. I have an MSW and also do a lot of advocacy and hold leadership positions with the National Association of Social Workers. And so in that, I was trained in child welfare. And coming up through child welfare, through my practicum and earning my degree, one of the things that I found to be constant in our system, particularly for families who are justice involved or court involved, mm-hmm. is that this concept of parent education is always at the core of some sort of reunification plan or some sort of concept of reuniting the family. And early on, during my training, there really wasn't a program that got to the heart of healing families and breaking generational cycles of dysfunctional parenting.
Definitely.
And so the Positive Parenting Program absolutely does that. It's a phenomenal program. It's evidence-based, as I mentioned. It's been around for 30 plus years. It's internationally recognized. And about 3 years ago, Governor Gavin Newsom actually included the program by name in its May revise, which has brought about some phenomenal financial opportunities for nonprofit organizations at the state level, which is amazing. But here's one thing that I'll share with you that is a core tenet of the program, which is, contrary to popular belief, we don't teach people how to be parents.
Exactly.
Right. But what we do is go over fundamental concepts that are really rooted in psychology, right? Self-regulation.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about breaking generational cycles of dysfunction, we're really talking about introspection, right? What's in you? What are your strengths as opposed to your negatives? And how do you relate that to your children?
Right. And also, I could say as a parent, I love my daughters so much. They're young adults now. Yeah. But certainly when they were younger, on a daily basis, pointed out my areas of development. You know, that whole idea that there are areas that I'm like, oh, I need to be better at this.
Right.
And I always saw it as an opportunity to understand that I need to work on,
right,
patience, or I need to work on, even if I'm frustrated, not raising my voice, right, or, and it takes practice.
It does.
Your children they are unbelievable human beings. Yeah. But they are id-based, and they are going to push your buttons, and you have to figure out how to de-escalate all of that.
Absolutely. Our children are a reflection of us, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a biological parent or a caregiver. If you are consistent in a child's life, at some point there will be that reckoning, right? And I think from that, one of the key things to understand is, what is the emotional and physical type of relationship that an adult wants to establish with their children? Mm-hmm. And for many of the parents that we work with, no one's ever sat down and talked to them from that emotional standpoint to tease out what are some of those things that they may not have received. We always tell parents, parenting is probably the most important job that you'll do, but the only one that doesn't come with the rule book, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And my own experience is, the moment you do figure something out, like what your child needs or how they need it,
yeah,
they up and develop and change, yeah, and that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, the bar is constantly
when they were
moving.
Babies, the moment I figured out why they were crying,
yeah,
the next day, that wasn't it anymore.
Right.
They'd moved on, and that's great to see your kids grow, but a little frustrating when you're like, it took me 2 weeks to figure out why you're crying at 6 p.m.
Right, but that's growth, right?
Oh, absolutely.
On the part of you as not just an adult, but a parent.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. So you mentioned something, and I know what it means, but I want you to tell the audience. You said evidence-based, and that's, yeah, really important, but not everyone knows what that means.
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, this means that we don't just believe that this is a phenomenal program that we're putting out into the community and hoping everyone will subscribe to, right? This means that this is backed by research and science, and there is a fidelity behind the model, one in which we track and measure on an annual basis. Mm-hmm. So every class that's delivered in the community, we are responsible for that class and we're accountable to that outcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And evidence-based, I can say, as a mental health practitioner, when I was doing my internship,
yeah,
certainly helps when you're learning to go, here are steps that I know, right, I need to make sure I'm helping my client take.
Absolutely.
And that I need to take to help, make, right, sure that I'm following what should be done. Right. Of course, therapy, as we both know, is incredibly dynamic. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Not at all.
It's one size fits one person in 1 week, right?
Exactly.
Like in that moment, you know?
Right.
And so how did you decide to get your master's in social work? And I always love to hear people's psychological origin stories.
Yeah. So one of the things that folks don't really know about me is I am a statistic defied. So I was born to teenage parents.
Okay.
Neither of my parents graduated high school, but always emphasized education to me. And so that was something from a very early age that didn't fully understand, but knew I was going to materialize. And I did. I attended the University of Pacific, which is a private university in the Central Valley, and I got my bachelor's in psychology. And this was around 2003, and at that time, social work was still kind of emerging. Didn't really understand what it was, and so I made my trek back to the Bay Area and actually landed in Contra Costa County. And at that time, this was about 06, 07, the Employment and Human Services Department, where I landed my first job out of college, had a partnership with the universities. And during that time, Title IV-E, which is this federal program that was enticing individuals to come back to school and get into the field of social work. So I went to an informational session, and I think for the first time, I was able to put some context behind a career path. And I thought that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I went back to school, which was a very interesting time because it was during the 08 recession. So I was in this first hired, last fired, type of situation. And fortunately, I was saved and ended up actually completing my master's degree and doing my practicum in children and family services right here in Contra Costa County.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I did not stay in child welfare. Again, it was a very interesting time, and interestingly enough, I was in a position where my education outweighed my experience. And the need for management level support arose, and so I threw my hat in the ring. And so what is very dynamic about my career, which is different from most, is I was actually trained in management, in government, and that was a lot of my career path up until this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, because most times people, they do social work and they're kind of out in they're out there doing it, and then they're like, all right, yes, I could do a supervisor position, and then okay, I'll manage, or I'll executive direct this, or whatever. So.
And anyone that has that misconception definitely, needs to study leadership and management, because those are two different concepts. And I really learned a lot about myself throughout that process. I think what resonated with me more than anything was my upbringing and my connection to community. Being able to take what was happening at the community level and transcend that into policy. In social work, we call that macro level work. And that was almost my superpower throughout my career. And my career ascended very quickly. I worked in Contra Costa County for 13 years. I actually had the fortunate opportunity to work in 2 other counties, Solano and Alameda, in various capacities, all in promotional opportunities. And so because of that, I really gained an education in how social constructs work, particularly when we talk about mental health, how systematically our society actually impacts families.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. So does COPE stand for is it an acronym for something?
Yeah, it is. So COPE stands for Counseling Options in Parent Education, which is such a mouthful, which is why we've condensed it down. It's a phenomenal nonprofit organization that was founded 14 years ago by an amazing woman, Kathy Botello, who found a need here in the county and established that program on the premise of parent education. I actually have been a part of the organization for more than a decade. As my career took off in government, I joined the board of directors, where I remained until Kathy decided she wanted to retire and asked me to be her replacement. And so I've been at COPE in the CEO role now for almost 2 years.
Wow. Yeah. Well, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. That is great.
Thank you.
What would you say are one or two things that you could tell any parent that's listening that could be helpful for them?
Yeah.
Because obviously you're dealing with people, as you said, who are within the system, as it were. There's a reason that they're coming to you, and there's already some challenges. But hey, before that even happens, what might you share that could be helpful?
Yeah. I think the primary thing would be not to lose hope. As an adult, as a parent, when we lose hope, there are eyes on us, right? There are people that are watching us, namely for parents, their children, and what you pour out into the world, your children absorb. And understanding that when you maintain a semblance of hope, they will also. And the second thing that I would say is to be very open and receptive to emotions, because that is the core of our mental well-being.
Absolutely. And I know with my daughters, they would accuse me, and still do actually, of, sort of therapizing them. And it's kind of hard because I have all this knowledge and I'm like, ooh. But even before I went to graduate school, I loved psychology. I too majored in psychology. And I found that emotional regulation is something, especially smaller children in the sort of, I'll say, 5 years old to 10 years old, can be very difficult and very confusing. And as a parent, recognizing and actually naming and sort of validating that they're having some strong emotions, and that's okay, and we're here to help you figure out how you deal with these overwhelming feelings. It could be frustration, it could be sadness, anger, anxiety.
Absolutely.
And that's so important because that has such a ripple effect of, oh, I understand how to emotionally regulate myself all the way through my life. And then that helps them when they're a parent. So.
Absolutely. Another evidence-based model that we run at COPE that deals directly with youth is the ARC model, so attachment, regulation, and competence. And we partner with a lot of our school districts as well as the County Office of Education to run these therapy groups. And we run them in 3 areas: anxiety, anger management, and social-emotional development. Because what we found in our role in truancy court is that these are the 3 areas that many of our youth cannot articulate but are challenged by.
Absolutely. I did my whole internship was school-based. I was middle school and high school.
Okay.
Even though I'm like, that's not necessarily my focus age group. It was, the opportunity was there, and so and I'm happy I did. And I ran some anxiety groups, and always challenging, I have to say, especially in the high school where inherently the adolescents were a little distrustful of the old bald man, but so awesome to see how once they felt comfortable. And I remember telling them, look, the first two of these are going to be a little challenging. You don't know each other. I'm asking you to be very vulnerable.
Right.
And that's the hard thing. Like, here we are talking about emotional regulation. All right, now I want you to actually like dive into this, lean into being emotionally open, because the payoff is great. And each one of my groups, they went for 8 weeks.
Yes.
And we'd be getting to like the seventh week. And they're like, I'd be talking about closing and that we were completing the group. And it's just getting good.
Every time, right?
And I also found that so many of my adolescent clients, once they got in and figured out that therapy wasn't a bad thing, were like, oh my gosh, so helpful. I wish I would have done this sooner.
Yes. We have been running our art groups since January, and the response has been overwhelming. And you said something that's really powerful, right? The majority of us in this industry understand that children just need a safe environment.
Yeah.
And the techniques that we are offering in the community with our parent education, and then coupling that with our youth services, the power in that safe environment coming from their own parent only magnifies the healing process.
Absolutely. Now, I am going to sound like an old man here for a moment and say that one of the areas that I see that is challenging, especially as it deals with mental health, depression, anxiety, and stuff, is our youth don't really know how to communicate interpersonally.
Correct.
Everything's on text. It's likes. It's how many likes did I get? And at least when I grew up, if I wanted to be mean to someone, I actually had to do it to their face.
Yes.
The most indirect way I could do it was on the telephone, but they still knew who it was, right?
Exactly.
Now people can say all kinds of mean things anonymously and stuff. And I just found that when it came to interpersonal communication and stuff, so many of my adolescent and even middle school kids just didn't know how to do it. They didn't have this skill set. And I was like, wow. I just assumed that everyone knew how to do it because I did, everyone else did.
And that's what we think, right? And society is changing so rapidly. There are, apps right now that I can't even keep up with. So the youth that are in our office and the youth that are in my lives that are helping me adjust to what's going on. I mean, when you think about that exponentially, things are increasing and intensifying in a way that we can't keep up.
Right.
And what is so significant about that is there has to be a way for us to measure that. There has to be a way for us to keep our finger on the pulse of that. And it really does come back to the fundamentals, identifying and naming emotions, providing the safe space to have those conversations about those emotions, normalizing that it is okay to feel, right, in a very personal way. And from those feelings, there are ways for us to manage those things.
Absolutely. And I just, interpersonal communications. I actually just had someone on my podcast last week, and we're talking about finding your authentic voice.
Yes.
And she was talking about how challenging it is for her to help young leaders who don't have the soft skill of, as a manager, of having difficult conversations, of understanding how to do that, maintain their own emotional regulation, but also find a way to be as comfortable as one can with an uncomfortable situation where someone else is upset.
Absolutely.
Or you know that someone's going to be upset by whatever you need to tell them, and they're like, well, I'll send a text. No, you actually have to have a conversation. Right. You have to use the words.
Yeah, and being true to your authentic self is such a huge part of character development.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that, as you mentioned, gets lost in translation, particularly when you're engaging with others behind screens. You never fully identify a sense of self, and there's a lack of emotional intelligence. Right? That development, which is so fundamental to establishing and maintaining relationships.
Absolutely, and like a almost biological imperative
Yes.
of I've got to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
And I don't have any answer for it. I just am noticing that this was going on.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, you know.
Yeah. And so, you know, one of the beautiful, natural, and just very organic service models that we have at COPE is this holistic services model. So I talked about parent education, I talked about our youth services, and so being able to conclude those services with bringing an entire family together for therapy is really an important part of, you know, the dynamic of strengthening families.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
And so we do that often. Much of what you talk about comes out in these therapy sessions where it's a true misunderstanding, right?
Yeah.
It's a generational gap, it's the advancement of technology, it's the lack of communication or fundamentally understanding each other's communication styles, and it's the lack of processing emotion.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, you know, it is, you and I could talk
Forever.
honestly, forever. I mean, there's so much we barely scratched the surface
Absolutely.
on this. Any thoughts about Mental Health Awareness Month that you want to share as we're coming to the end of our time?
Yeah, you know, I think we touched on a lot of it, mainly around supporting our youth, keeping them mentally and emotionally strong, and really just paying attention to the signs and symptoms of what's happening in their social development. I think as long as we can do that and make a commitment as adults and caregivers to support and uphold their developmental journey, we will be a greater society for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in. This has just been so much fun.
Thank you.
And just because I know it's important.
Yeah.
Again, it's called COPE.
COPE Family Support Center. We are located in Walnut Creek, and anyone can reach out to us at info@cope, C-O-P-E, familysupport.org.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, Natasha,
really
for coming in. I want to remind everyone that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And as always, remember that epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.